Shalom, good evening. This is TV7 Israel News broadcast to you from Jerusalem. And in today's top stories, a shooting attack in the Palestinian town of Hawara has left 2 IDF soldiers wounded, while the assailant managed to flee the scene. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu dismissed Defense Minister Yoav Gallant after he called to suspend legislation related to the judicial reform in light of dire ramifications to Israel's security. Amid intensified public discord, which includes a nationwide strike by Israel's major labor unions and private sector, Prime Minister Netanyahu is seeking approval from his coalition partners to postpone legislation related to judicial reform until after the Passover and Independence Day holidays. A shooting attack in the Palestinian town of Hawara has left 2 IDF soldiers wounded, while the assailant managed to flee the scene. In a third such attack in less than 4 weeks, at least 1 Palestinian assailant opened fire from a passing vehicle toward an IDF post in the northern Samaria town, situated west from the Palestinian city of Nablus. As a result, 1 IDF soldier sustained severe wounds, while another was diagnosed in moderate condition. In response to the attack, a joint manhunt of a few branches of the Israeli security establishment has been launched in pursuit of the attacking assailant. Meanwhile, following a situation assessment by IDF Central Command Commander Major General Yehuda Fuchs, a decision was made to raise the level of alert throughout the West Bank districts of Samaria and to deploy additional forces and tools to bolster security throughout the relevant sectors. Separately, as part of Operation Wastebreaker, IDF, ISA or Shin Bet, and Border Police Special Operations Forces conducted counter-terror activity throughout Judea and Samaria over the weekend, during which a total of 14 suspected terror operatives were apprehended. And while gunfire was heard in a number of the sectors in which the Israeli forces were operating, thankfully no injuries were reported. Meanwhile, IDF Chief of General Staff Lieutenant General Herzi Halevi visited the Israeli military's enlistment center, Tel HaShomer, yesterday, during which he addressed new draftees of the Artillery Corps, Field Intelligence Corps, and Search and Rescue Brigades on the tense period which Israel is currently facing.
אתם מתגייסים בתקופה ביטחונית מאתגרת. יש לנו הרבה מאוד אתגרים, 75 שנה יש הרבה מאוד אתגרים ביטחוניים, ואנחנו מתעסקים היום גם עם איראן, שהיא מצד אחד מאוד רחוקה, מצד שני גם משפיעה כאן קרוב. אנחנו מתעסקים עם לבנון, מתעסקים עם סוריה, עם רצועת עזה, טרור ביהודה ושומרון, שגם אתמול בשעות הערב המוקדמות הוציא פיגוע קשה עם חיילים שנפצעו, ואנחנו מאחלים להם באמת רפואה שלמה.
Amid nationwide unrest, which includes an alarming public debate over refusals to volunteer to the IDF reserves if the government's judicial reform proceeds in its current framework, General Halevi also highlighted the requirement to leave disagreements and personal opinions outside of the framework of the IDF. It is important to know that Israel's security establishment is deeply alarmed by the negative impact which the public debate has over the IDF in particular and the country's separate security organizations in general. As a result, and in light of the growing challenges facing Israel on multiple fronts, Israeli Defense Minister Yoav Gallant, who is one of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's most prominent Likud members, held a press conference on Saturday evening in which he warned of the public discord which emanates from the government's intention to reform the country's judiciary. And while Jerusalem's top defense official genuinely believes in the necessity to reform the judicial branch of government, he also underscored the necessity to alleviate public tensions and engage in dialogue for the sake of Israel's unity and security.
האירועים המתרחשים בחברה הישראלית אינם פוסחים על צבא ההגנה לישראל. מכל עבר עולות תחושות של כעס, כאב ואכזבה בעוצמה בה לא נתקלתי מעולם. אני רואה כיצד מקור עוצמתנו הולך ונשחק. כשר הביטחון של מדינת ישראל, אני אומר בצורה הברורה ביותר, השסע הולך ונפער בחברה, חודר אל תוך צה"ל ואל גופי הביטחון. זו סכנה ברורה, מיידית ומוחשית לביטחון המדינה. לדבר הזה לא אתן את ידי. בימים ובשבועות האחרונים, בשיחות ובדיונים מאחורי הקלעים, הצגתי את תמונת המצב הביטחונית, ביקשתי, נימקתי והבהרתי. בעת הזו חייבים לעצור את התהליך כדי שנוכל לשבת ולדבר. אבל עכשיו אני אומר זאת בקולי, באופן פומבי, למען ביטחון ישראל, למען בנותינו ובנינו. צריך לעצור בעת הזו את תהליך החקיקה, לאפשר לעם ישראל לחגוג יחד את חג הפסח ואת יום העצמאות, ולהתאבל יחד ביום הזיכרון וביום השואה. אלו ימים קדושים עבורנו.
Minister Gallant further asserted the necessity to immediately halt the demonstrations and to engage in dialogue, to immediately seize any voices of refusal to serve in the IDF, which according to him erodes the military's power and harms the defense establishment as a whole. Meanwhile, in response to this public call by Jerusalem's top defense official, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, while in London for an official state visit, announced several minutes before 9 p.m. on Saturday evening that he decided to dismiss Defense Minister Yoav Gallant without giving additional details. Consequently, as news of the dismissal spread, thousands of Israelis took to the streets throughout the country, including predominantly in Tel Aviv and Jerusalem, where a number of riots erupted and main traffic arteries were blocked as police were seemingly overwhelmed by the protesting multitudes.
We served 4 years in the army, 3 years. Everyone here served in the army and they are serving too. And we are going to protect the democracy. We are here for the democracy.
The protests continued well into the night until approximately 4 o'clock on Sunday morning. The next day, on Sunday, political officials who spoke to TV7 on condition of anonymity have confirmed that Prime Minister Netanyahu was seeking approval from his coalition partners to postpone legislation related to the judicial reform, as a growing number of members of his own Likud party voiced disdain over the dismissal of Defense Minister Gallant, including senior member Yuli Edelstein, who chairs Parliament's Foreign Affairs and Defense Committee, and who highlighted the bad timing amid growing threats to Israel's security. Meanwhile, in spite of the repeated calls on the government to postpone its legislative push, Chairman of the Parliamentary Constitution, Law and Justice Committee, Simcha Rotman, pledged to unyieldingly persist, insisting that calls by growing numbers of senior members of the military and the public were seemingly illegitimate.
The legislation in the committee room continues as usual. We have a few minutes until the last votes on the committee, and I think that the coalition stands strong. The fact that people demanding to stop legislation because some groups do not accept the outcomes of the elections in Israel, I think it's the most undemocratic thing one can imagine, and no democratic country should accept this halt in legislation when it comes out in the threats of people in the army, in the streets, demonstrating against it, and basically demonstrating not against a specific act or a specific government. They're demonstrating against the people, against the choice of the people, and that's undemocratic.
Subsequently, during a seeming unruly committee session that included a vote on the reform's most crucial bill related to the appointments of Supreme Court judges, the coalition approved the proposed law for possible ratification in Parliament's plenum, which could be deliberated as early as tonight. In light of the coalition's refusal to postpone legislation, with tensions reaching new heights, Israel's major trade unions, along with the private sector, announced a general strike throughout Israel until the moment in which the government halts its legislation and engages in dialogue.
כולנו, מעסיקים ועובדים במדינת ישראל לאורכה או לרוחבה, עוצרים את המהפכה המשפטית ועוצרים את הטירוף.
Major public and private businesses nationwide followed up on the call, including most academic institutions and even the health sector, with Israel's Medical Association pledging its support. Moreover, Ben Gurion International Airport suspended almost all departures until further notice.
So we tried to get home to Vienna, but nobody told us if we can fly, or earliest in 2 hours we will get more information if our flight will start today or not. So we're waiting and hope for good news so that we can go back to Vienna.
It is important to know that following extensive deliberations among leaders of the governing coalition in Jerusalem, in light of the Prime Minister's aspirations to find a compromise, an agreement has been reached several minutes after 6 p.m. earlier this evening, which includes a suspension of the legislative part of the judicial reform by 1 month. Thank you for watching TV7 Israel News. We would like to encourage you, pray for our persecuted brothers and sisters worldwide, as well as for the peace of Jerusalem and salvation of Israel. I'm Jonathan Hassan, wishing you a Shavua Mevorach, and God willing, we'll see you again tomorrow at the same time.